So thank you, Viva, and thank you to the Honourable Nick Crane, and thank you to Gabriella. I must say it is a real honour to be standing in front of all of you today. Every great story begins with the first tiny concepts. For me, that was when Gabriella first told me some of the details of her mother's life. I was immediately and completely enthralled. Here was a story that spoke right to the heart. A story about ordinary men and women thrown into completely extraordinary situations. And not just surviving, but actually flourishing, as extraordinary as they can seem to be. It was when Gabriella showed me her synopsis that I realised that this was a project really without peer. There are certain stories that simply must be told. I feel it is a duty to the next generation, telling them what their elders lived through so that they could be free. It really does place life into perspective. Often when looking at such stories, I find myself wondering what I would do in the same situation. Would I have their courage? I can only hope the answer is yes, and pray that I'm never tested in the same way. Georgina, her husband, and her brother certainly proved that they had this courage in abundance. One of the lessons I've learned from Georgina in particular was that you should never underestimate your own abilities. From birth, she was raised to believe that she was special and that everything would go right for her. And despite losing everything time and time again, she never ceased this incredible optimism, and it never ceased being true. Georgina had a sense of mischief and defiance about her that meant she simply could not bear to remain hidden at the effect of the world. In an age when Jews were so heavily oppressed, she was extravagant and outrageous. She loved nothing more than to be the life of the party and to dress and live expensively. This was hardly a good method of keeping under the radar. And yet for Georgina it was extremely effective. Sometimes the safest place is close to the enemy. When the pogrom started to become truly vicious, however, preventing Jews from working, she neatly sidestepped the problem by dyeing her hair blonde and obtaining a false passport. Here too was another act of incredible courage by the woman who helped her with the passport. To get a false passport in those times, one had to copy the identity of a real person, and for it to really work, the other person needed to be in agreement. For Georgina, her old friend Maria Savage was that person. And having such a good false passport certainly saved her life. Had Maria been discovered, however, she would have been imprisoned and possibly executed. With a duplicate identity in the system, there was a very real possibility of just that happening. Sometimes when looking at an event such as the Holocaust, which was full of such unrivaled horror, one can forget that there were those such as Maria who stood up against it and defied it with acts of individual courage and humanity. All too often, such seemingly small acts are forgotten, but it is our duty to remember them. All through the war, and through the tyrannical communist regime that took power in its wake, Georgina refused to be bowed or broken by her circumstances. I believe there is something everyone can learn from in this. There is always a way to get around even the most horrendous of problems. And let's face it, what could be worse than that one? First, you have to believe you can, though. And that is why I've written my dedication in the book to all those who believe. It has been a true pleasure and honour to be able to assist Gabriella in writing this book. The real effort involved was to make sure that it was written exactly as it was needed to be. So Gabriella's voice came through, and the research had to be exact. So it was quite a feat. Thank you very much for coming, and I hope you too will be as inspired by Georgina's story. Thank you.